Okay, if you're watching this, that means you're finished with lesson one, and now it's time for Unit 4, lesson 2, expanding and factoring expressions. This is also a pretty short lesson, and I think you'll enjoy it. It's also one of the more important ones because what you're learning now are skills that will take you through all of this course, your algebra course, and then on into high school as well. So your goal for today is to be able to expand and factor algebraic expressions, and mostly we're going to be using the distributive property. So we're going to have two parts to this. The first part of this lesson is going to be expanding expressions, and we're going to be using the distributive property. This is one of the more important and most used of the properties that we use in math. You're going to see this quite a bit, and so let's get started with it. So first, what does expand mean? Expand means that when we have an algebraic expression that includes parentheses or brackets, these kind of grouping symbols, that we want to remove them. And so in algebra, sometimes when we put two things next to each other, it means to multiply. So when I see what's in red down here, 3 times the sum of x plus 4, what that means is I need to multiply 3 times x and 3 times 4. And I've kind of expanded that out over here. So you see 3 times x, and then we have a plus sign, 3 times x plus 3 times 4. So this is what the distributive property is. So you might want to take a second and write this down. But the distributive property is a property that tells us that when there's a multiplier on the outside of the grouping symbols, all the terms, right, every one of them that's inside the grouping symbols is going to be multiplied by that multiplier. And again, if you need time to stop, just pause this and write this down. But here's a really clear example. So we're going to use an example that's just made up of numbers and constants, not made up of variables. So I could very easily use the order of operations to solve this, right? 5 plus 4 is 9, and then 5 times 9 would be 45. But I could also use the distributive property. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the 5 times 5, and I'm going to add that to the 5 times 4, right? So this is just another way of doing what we've just done. So 5 times 5 is going to give me 25, and 5 times 4 is going to give me 20. And when I add that, I still get 45, right? So this is just another way of being able to evaluate or to simplify this expression. Now, in algebra, we use this quite a bit. So I'd like you to copy these 3 problems down and put them in your notebook. These are 3 examples using the distributive property. And they all have something different. So the first one is just basically, just a nice, easy problem. Second one, we're going to deal with negatives. And the third one, we're going to deal with fractions. So when I look at the first one, I know I'm going to multiply 4 times 3x, and then I'm going to multiply 4 times 1. Now, sometimes it's people remember to multiply the first term, but they always forget that last one. So you can remember everything that's in the parentheses is being multiplied by 4. This is going to give me 12x plus 4. Okay, it's not really hard. All you're going to do is multiply the coefficient by the 4. That's 12x. And then 4 times 1 obviously is 4. Now in the second example, we're multiplying negative 3 times the sum of, or the difference of m minus 2n. So negative 3 times n and negative 3 times negative 2n. Now remember, negative times positive is negative, so negative 3m. And then a negative times a negative is a positive here. So negative times positive, negative 3m. Negative 3 times negative 2n gives me 6n. And since these are not like terms, that's as far as I can go. I can't simplify this any further. Okay, the last one. This has 3 terms, and it also has a fraction. So what we're going to do is we're going to take half of each of these things. Now pay really close attention to this, because the fractions are where things kind of get a little dicey. Half of 8 is 4. That's easy. So that gives me 4y. The coefficient in front of x is 1 right now. So I'm taking half of 1, which is just 1/2. And then I'm going to take half of 5, or minus 5. So I get negative, or not negative, I get half of 8y, which is 4y, half of x, which is 1/2 x, and then half of 5, which is 5 over 2. And that's what my answer is going to be. So 4y plus half of an x minus, remember 5 times 1 is 5 over 2, 5 halves, right? So, so everything you've learned with integers, with fractions, with decimals, we're going to be doing, but now we're going to be doing it with variables as well. All right? So now we can take this one step further. And what we're going to do is we're going to combine it with the last lesson. We're going to expand expressions, but we're also going to simplify them. So here's like a really clear example of that. All right? Let's say I have this expression. 5 times the difference of x minus 4 plus 12x. Well, I'm going to multiply the 5 times x, that gives me 5x, and the 5 times 4 gives me minus 20. Now I'm not going to multiply the 12x because it's not inside the parentheses. But you'll notice that in red, I put the like term. So 5x plus 12x, remember the sign that's in front of each term determines whether it's positive or negative, or a minus or a plus. So in the end, I'm going to get 17x minus 20. Now the second one's a little more complicated, and it's a little longer. So negative 7 times negative 2d gives me 14d. Negative 7 times negative 1f gives me 7f, right? 3 times negative d gives me plus negative 3d. And then 3 times 5f gives me 15f. And again, you'll see I color-coded this so you can see the like terms. Now again, it's really important. Getting the number is really pretty easy. 7 times 2 is always 12, but making sure you have the right sign is where you really have to be concentrated and paying really close attention. Now I've got 14d plus negative 3d. That means I'm going to subtract the 3d. That gives me 11d. And 7f plus 15f gives me 22f. So we're taking what we've learned in the previous lesson, and we're just bringing it one step further by using the distributive property and by combining like terms and these really, really longer algebraic expressions. So what I have here for you now are 4 examples. What I'd like you to do is take your time, really take your time. Be careful of the signs. Expand out when you can, right? So here and here and here, you see we can multiply by negative 2, we can multiply by 4. Be really careful with the fractions. Pause this, and then when you're done, come back and check in and see how you did. And if you are getting the right answers, that's great. That means you're learning. If you're not, you're still learning. Just means that maybe you need to see me or see a classmate to get some clarification on why the answers aren't the way they are. All right, so pause this, and when you're done, check for your answers. All right, in the first one in the top left-hand corner, we're going to wind up getting negative 6x minus 8, because negative 2 times 4 is going to give me a negative minus 8 plus 4x. When I add the like terms, I wind up getting negative 2x minus 8. On the one below it, really all I'm doing is changing the signs down here. This is kind of a really important one because I'm taking minus negative 4, which becomes positive 4, and minus positive 2, which becomes negative 2. There was nothing to do with the first expression that's in parentheses because there was no multiplier. So now I've got 4f and nothing to combine it with. I've got negative 3 and negative 2. That's going to give me negative 5. 2g and 4g give me 6g. And I would put these in alphabetical order. So I have 4f plus 6g minus 5. Always put the constant at the end. All right, the final problem. 4 times 3/4 x. Oh, I'm sorry, we're up here. Sorry. Half of x, 8x, is 4x. Half of 12 is 6. That was easy. 2 times 3x is 6x, and 2 times 1 is 2. I combine the terms. 4x and 6x give me 10x. 6 and 2 give me 8. And then down in the bottom, 4 times 3/4 is 12/4. 12/4 is 3, so that gives me 3x. 4 times negative 1 becomes negative 4. Then I'm subtracting 1/2 of an x. Now, if I do 3x minus 1/2 x, that gives me 2.5 x's. But in algebra, we try to keep things in mixed number, or not mixed number, improper fraction form. So 2.5 as a fraction is 5/2 times x minus 4. So hopefully you did really well on this. If you had any problems or any questions, please come see me immediately, and I can help you with these. Don't struggle. I mean, I want you to struggle when you're doing them, but if there are any questions and you need any clarification, please come and see me before you move on to section 2. So that's it for this section. It was kind of quick. You can start the first part of the assignment, but I'd really kind of prefer if you just continue the video and saw the factoring part, which is coming up right now. Okay, part 2 of this lesson is factoring. And factoring is actually, if you can do the expanding, the factoring is kind of like the same, but in the opposite direction. So factoring is kind of like using the distributive property in reverse. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take an expression, and we're going to rewrite it as a product. And what that means is we're going to change it into a multiplication. So we're kind of going to do the opposite of what we just did. So the best way of doing this is by showing you a couple of examples. So here are 2 examples. These are both pretty easy. Again, you're going to write this down. Now you remember from your elementary school days how to find the greatest common factor. Factor is a number that divides evenly into 2 numbers. So when I look at 4 and I look at 8, I know that 2 goes into 4 and 2 goes into 8, but I also know that 4 goes into 4 and 4 goes into 8. So while 2 and 4 are both factors, the greatest common factor is 4. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write this with parentheses I'm going to put the 4 on the outside. The 4 becomes the multiplier. So to make 4x, I just need to multiply 4 times x. And then to make 8, remember this is just doing the distributive property in reverse. 4 times x give me the 4x. 4 times 2 give me the 8. This is called factoring. Factoring is a huge part of algebra. It gets way more complicated as you get further in. But right now, this is where we're going to be. All right, now, take a look at the second one, 20x minus 5. By now, you've probably already figured that the greatest common factor is 5. So the 5 is going to go on the outside of the parentheses. And to make 20x, I have to multiply by 4x, because 5 times 4 is 20x. Now I've got a minus sign, so really be careful with the signs. 5, that's a minus, times negative 1, or 5 minus 1 is going to wind up giving me 5 times 1, which is 5. So I can kind of check my work by going backwards and doing 5 times 4x, 20x, minus 5 times 1, which is 5. So just like before, here are 3 examples. I'd like you to try these. On the bottom one, just a little hint. When you find your greatest common factor, put the negative on the outside of the parentheses. It'll make it a little bit easier for you. Okay, so by now you've copied these down and you've done it. On the first one, you can see the common factor is going to be 3, and you should have 3 times the sum of x plus 4 in parentheses. Next up, 5 is a common factor of 10 and 15, and to make 10x plus 15, we do 5 times 2x plus 3. On the bottom, we're going to pull the negative 20 out. So it's probably easier to have the negative on the outside of the parenthesis. So since 20 goes into 20 and 20 goes into 60, we have negative 20 times x. That gives me negative 20x. And now I've got to make the 3 a negative or a minus, because a negative times a negative gives me the positive 60. And finally, the last one, 27m minus n. That's kind of easy. You know that 9 is going to be the common factor. I'm going to get 9 times 3m minus 1, because 9 times 3m is 27m. 9 times 1 is 9, and we have the minus sign in the middle. So that's it for lesson 2. That was kind of quick, actually. Just like every lesson, you're going to finish the classwork for the section, check your answers before you move on. When you're done, you can either see me if you made a bunch of mistakes and you need to fix them, or just move on to lesson 3. But make sure I get the answers and your work and it's been checked. Reflect on the work that you've done, make sure you're ready to move on, and then proceed either to reviewing lesson 2 or moving on to lesson 3. I hope you're enjoying this kind of learning. I think it makes it more individual and more personalized for you. And that's kind of a good thing. So see me if you need help. See me if you have your work done. And good luck on lesson 3.